Hi, I'm Allie Jackson Jolly. I'm here with Paul Barrett, who is the Deputy Director of the NYU Stern Center for Business and Human Rights. Paul, welcome.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I wanted to have you here to talk about so-called billionaire pundits. You know, billionaires who use their very public personas and platforms to weigh in on business issues, social issues, policy issues, and sometimes enact change through that. So most recently in the news, you would have to be not watching or reading the news not to know about sort of the public dialogue, discourse between Bill Ackman and his alma mater, the university, Harvard University, in which he weighed in and was ultimately, I think, instrumental in the president's decision to step down, to resign. I was curious, when you think about, you know, Ackman's not the only one, Mark Cuban, Elon Musk, when these billionaires have these very public conversations using their platform, do you think that's a good thing for public discourse, or does that cause you any concern?
Well, I think it is a cause of concern to the extent that no one, should be too happy about the idea that having tons of money in the bank and in the stock market and so forth ought to give somebody a greater claim to participate in the public square than any other person. So to the degree that the money is essentially buying celebrity, which in turn is exchanged for attention, I think it's something that everyone should be a little queasy about. Now, having said that, I think everybody's ideas should be evaluated on their merits. Just because you're rich doesn't mean you don't know what you're talking about. It may mean that you're a little more used to sounding off than the next person because you may be surrounded by yes men and women who are constantly telling you what a genius you are and how your ideas are going to save the world. But if a Bill Ackman or an Elon Musk has something sensible to say, then let's hear it. I personally don't discount public pronouncements because they're issued by someone who's rich or poor or someplace in between.
For example, Elon Musk has been, very vocal about his disdain for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in corporate America. He has been vocal about his thoughts that white Americans and AAPI Americans have been on the bad side, the downside of those initiatives. Do you think that there's some value to having billionaires sort of say the stuff out loud that may be being said behind closed doors, so in this way it's being aired? Or do you think that, this is a polarizing thing?
Well, I think the premise that the opinions that Elon Musk or Bill Ackman or anybody else who's got a ton of money give voice to otherwise would be suppressed really is not connected to reality. There are plenty of critics of DEI who are not multi-billionaires and who don't own prominent social media platforms or other kinds of companies. There are plenty of people who were critical of the testimony by the Ivy League university presidents before Congress, and then subsequently critical of the Harvard presidents' incidents in the past of plagiarism, who were not, hedge fund moguls. So I think it's a little bit of a fallacy that we just wouldn't be hearing those opinions were it not for the brave billionaires. Again, the billionaires can sound off. I think there is a risk that people who have a lot of money, particularly in this country where a lot of people respect people who have a lot of money, that they'll get too much attention for their views. That the deference paid to them will be outsized. And here, in connection, for example, with Ackman and Harvard, let's put something else on the table. He's a huge Harvard donor. So the deference he's going to get from that institution is not only because he's a billionaire, but because he gives a small fraction of his money, which is a lot of money in absolute terms, to Harvard. And Harvard doesn't want to see that money go away. It also doesn't want to see other billionaires turn away from their annual donations to Harvard. So, you got to go case by case, in my view, understand where the wealthy person's influence comes from, how they deploy that influence. But I certainly don't think that we should look on our billionaire class as the vindicators of the First Amendment. We can defend the First Amendment and free speech very well without them. Thank you.
Yeah, and so when you talk to your students or, those that are studying exactly what you're talking about here, how do you suggest that they balance exactly that, like, giving thought and voice to billionaires without over-indexing? Or how do you tell a young business person or journalist or lawyer or whoever, whatever industry, fill in the blank, to think about this through a filter that allows, I guess, them not to your point, not to give too much deference to someone just because they're a celebrity billionaire.
All right. Well, I think that the tool for this is the tool that all of our parents taught us a long time ago, which is that the standards that apply in your day-to-day life with the people you interact with are the same standards that will serve you well in the larger world when you start to interact with companies and employers and, God help you, billionaires. The golden rule works very well. Treat other people the way that you would want them to treat you. Common sense about whether people have some type of self-interest in what they're saying, that's very valuable. If someone is speaking out against their own interest, if a billionaire, for example, is saying that that he himself or herself and their fellow billionaires do not pay enough taxes in this country because tax rates are too low, well, that probably deserves a little bit more deference because it's against the speaker's interest. And there you have people like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and others who have said, look, the system is tilted too far in our favor. Then I think the billionaires deserve some deference. They know whereof they speak. It's their money, and they know all about how the tax system works. When a donor to a large university is kind of pistol whipping the administration of that university to do exactly what he wants them to do, well, remember that is not the entirety of the relationship. There's also the question of that billionaire's donations to the institution, and I think his views in that context perhaps deserve more skepticism.
Yeah, that's interesting. I appreciate that. Well, we're out of time. I'm going to give you a second. Is there any parting thought that you think I missed? Is there any piece of this conversation that you think is important for our viewers to know that I didn't ask you? I wanted to give you a moment just to weigh in there.
Sure. I think in approaching these questions, common sense is the great filter for all of these things. If what people are saying sounds like it makes sense on its own without connection to who's saying it, then perhaps it's worth listening to. Just because someone wealthy says it, doesn't mean that it deserves any more attention than what the guy across the street has to say.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Sure.
I really appreciate your input here, and I will take your advice in mind the next time one of the billionaires talks to us about the First Amendment. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and you tell him I said so.